All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is JQ Hanna. I'm the Assistant Director of Food Co-op Initiative, and this is our FCI Live series. Thanks so much for coming out tonight and joining us. This is a topic that some people had asked about. People have been hearing more and more in the startup food co-op community about the Network for Developing Conscious Communities. So we asked Ron to come and join us. Ron Hansen is the Executive Director of that organization, and just tell us what exactly it is. People are aware they do some co-op work, that they're in the Black cooperative space, but we wanted to give Ron a chance to come and really share about what his organization does, so you know what it's about as a startup food co-op, so you know how you can utilize it. So this is our Developing Conscious Community sessions, and with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Ron can get his slides ready. And Ron, I think our understanding, just so everyone who's here knows, Ron has got a presentation. If you've got questions or thoughts that come up during it, please do go ahead and throw them in the chat. We're going to open up the floor, Ron's going to open up the floor to everyone at the end for hopefully a real conversation, and people can just talk and pitch in, and it can be a real kitchen table type conversation. But if you have thoughts or questions during the presentation, I don't know about you, I forget. So feel free to throw those things in the chat so we make sure we get to them. And we would love to see a conversation happening there as well. And I will now mute and turn it over to Ron.
Well, thank you, JQ. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited about being here this evening and sharing the work of the network with you. And so I just, as a housekeeping matter, if there are some pressing questions that you may have as I go through this short presentation, feel free to either post them in the chat, or so JQ can direct them to me, and I can hopefully respond to them. Or if you choose to hold your questions to the end of the presentation, that's okay too, because we're going to have plenty of time to engage and exchange across this kitchen table ideas and thoughts. All right. And so I use the word kitchen table because this is really just a kitchen table conversation about the Network for Developing Conscious Communities. And before I get started, I do want to just say who we are. We are a emerged national organization focused on building the ecosystem for Black-led organizations working in the space of community development. And we define community development in many aspects. Those that are working in the area of housing, small business, cultural arts, health, and all the things that come with that. And our role is really to not only advocate on behalf of Black-led organizations, but to also build out the ecosystem and supportive services that they need to grow. So with that said, I want to just show a quick agenda. I'll go through the mission statement of the organization, the vision statement. I'll share some of the activities that we've been engaged in, what our guiding principles are, and our Black community development policy. So the mission statement. Well, we just went through a process this year of re-examining our mission statement. And so our mission statement is simple, just to inspire conscious development of sustainable Black communities through the practice of mindful collective principles. And when we talk about collective principles, we're talking about mindful collective principles in terms of how we do what we do, and do it in a way that's elevating people. Do it in a way that's bringing people together to in a sustainable way, to build out paradigms that they have felt, or paradigms that they want to elongate themselves in. Our vision statement is fully engaged Black governed community development organizations in the conscious rebuilding and restoration of Black under-resourced and disinvested communities through creating transformational paradigm shifts in community development. It's a lot of words, but really the bulk of what we do is really try to create transformational paradigm shifts in community development. You know, over the years that I've worked in this field, I've seen a lot. I've got over 35 years of experience working in space of community development. And one of the things that continually plagues me is the amount of resources that I've seen that come into developing and supporting Black communities, but the lack of sustainability that I see that occurs as a result of it. So you have these resources that are coming into the community, but yet 5 years, 10 years down the road, you can go back into those communities and still see the despair, see the lack of intentionality around growth. And so I developed this organization with the thought that it wasn't about the resources that was coming into the community, it's about the mindset. And so we focus on shifting the mindset of folks in the Black community around how we do what we do and why we do what we do. So that's a big charge. So over the years, we've since 2015, since our founding, our upcoming in 2015, we've done events every year except for the really major year of this last pandemic. So we started out in 2015 when our first event, we hosted with a community, a college group on the campus of Morgan State University. And we formulated a summit. And the summit was the community development challenges in communities of color. And so the summit engaged local stakeholders in conscious, authentic dialogues aimed at examining best practice and strategies for regenerating communities of color and building supportive networks to support developing unique partnerships among philanthropic organizations, government agencies, financial institutions, and national community development intermediaries. So that was our first event. And I think back on it, and I had a gentleman that came from New Orleans, the 9th Ward. And so his name was Burnell Cotton. And Burnell was a Army vet who went back into the 9th Ward. And if you're familiar with the New Orleans landscape, the 9th Ward was actually where the levees were breached. And so a lot of the big box retailers didn't come back into that area. And so the area was left without even just mainstay stores to purchase. And so Burnell took on the responsibility of developing a store in that 9th Ward. And to his credit, he's grown the store exponentially to be a beacon of service for the community. And so I was happy to have met Burnell, and I met him really through a PBS short story that they had did on him. And I reached out to him, and he was welcoming to come to Baltimore to share his story with us. And so we were really blessed to have it. In 2016, we partnered with Coppin State University Nonprofit Alliance Program to host the West Baltimore National Community Development Conference. And right now in Baltimore, West Baltimore is getting a lot of lift in Baltimore City. But back in 2016, it wasn't. And we brought attention to the needs of West Baltimore in terms of transportation, affordable housing, small business development. And so I was really happy with the turnout that we got at that conference and what we were able to do in terms of offering the community at least a platform for dialogue. And so that was really a great opportunity to share our work in Baltimore. And matter of fact, I am a local Baltimorean, even though I live in DC now. But my heart is still vested in Baltimore. And so I'll share some of the activities that we're doing to enhance our work in Baltimore. So from 2017 to 2019, we co-hosted the People and Places Conference. Some of you might have attended that conference, and we hosted it with 4 national network organizations: the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Association, NACEDA, the National Association for Latino Asset Builders, NALCAB, the National Coalition for Asian American Community Development Organizations, and the National Urban League. And so we attracted, over the course of the 2 years that we did support that effort, we attracted over 550 community development practitioners, featuring a broad range of plenary sessions focused on state and local programmatic solutions for blight, equitable development, and asset growth. In 2018, we hosted singly one of our major conferences, and we entitled it the Developing Conscious Momentum in Under-Resourced, Underinvested Communities Conference. This conference was a national peer learning event for placemakers, leaders to improve lives and strengthen their places of activity. In 2019, we hosted the Symposium on Racial Equitable Community Development, focusing sessions on developing strategies on how to deconstruct racism and elevate the need for developing a continuum of racially informed practices and equitable development frameworks. Unfortunately, we still are in a space where race-based practices are still impeding this work. I share with my white colleagues the need for them to elevate, among their colleagues, the need to be equitable around the community development. For so many years, I've seen white-led groups profit off of the back of poor communities of color. And if we're going to grow as a society, we have to be willing to share. And that's a big thing in this work, sharing resources. It seems like, the foundation sometimes have us vying against each other. But I feel though that if we can coalesce around collective ideas, I think that and feel that we'll be able to transform many of the communities that we all are vested in changing. In 2019, from 2019 to 2020, we launched a cooperative academy. And we launched it in Baltimore, and then we launched the academy in the District of Columbia. And we had 3 cohorts that we did spring, summer, and the fall. Well, we transitioned that Co-op Academy to rename it and rebrand it as the Black Co-opinomics Academy. And so we're doing it nationally, where we're allowing groups to participate from all walks of life, from all parts of the country. So we just recently launched our last cohort last Saturday, and so we're looking forward to the outcomes of that cooperative academy. We have 4 teams that are participating, and so I'll keep you abreast about what we're doing with the academy. In October of 2019, we again focused on the symposium around racial equitable community development, and we developed strategies on how to deconstruct racism and elevate the need for developing a continuum of racially informed practice and equitable development net frameworks. And so, again, not that I find any solace in the work around race, but I do find a need to continue to elevate the conversation around racial equitable community development, particularly in this industry that we're in now. And so, so in 2019, we hosted that event, and like everyone else in 2020, we were in the thralls of the pandemic. And so we stayed solid. We hunkered in and did our best to just protect ourselves from the pandemic, from the virus. And so we did resurface this year, and we resurfaced with not only doing the Black Co-opinomics Academy, which I just said we're now doing, but also we did a hybrid where we planned a hybrid conference on the National Conference on Black Cooperative Agenda. And so we started it in September, and we were hoping to have a hybrid conference. And unfortunately, with the peak in the virus, we moved it to just a virtual conference. And so we had over close to 200 people that attended virtually. But that wasn't enough, because we felt that we had missed being in a space of physical space of connecting with people. You can get so much lift out of doing things virtually, and I'm quite sure all of you have experienced this yourselves. And so we came back in April of this year and did second part of the National Conference of Black Cooperative Agenda, and we did it in a physical space. And so since then, we've been working after that conference in April to build out a framework for developing a national organization around Black cooperatives that would focus on building out the ecosystem for Black-led cooperatives. We are been working with some other Black cooperatives in terms of framing out this dialogue, and we're planning to have a planning meeting in October in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to explore what that looks like, how we should incorporate it, the mission, the vision. So I'm looking forward to partaking in that. So I'll stop here and entertain some questions. If there are any questions that are pressing that folks want to share or comments, you can do that now before I go on.
Give folks a second if they want to type anything in or unmute. I told you, these evening sessions. Go ahead.
Hey, Ron. Good evening. How's it going?
Oh, yes. Who's this?
Eric Simpson.
Oh, yes. How are you doing, Eric?
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Good to see you again. Good to see you again. And
Thank you.
glad to see that you're out making the rounds, trying to build it up. Yes. But my question for you this evening, if you could just share in maybe one or two, at most 3 sentences, what's your vision for the network for developing conscious communities, as far as when this organization has got all of its pieces in place, all of its money, and you got everything that you need to carry out the vision? What do you see at the end of this?
Well, at the end of it, really, I see us working our way out of this business. I see us having come to a point where we have done all we can do and should do, and and we've empowered the community. And I think that's, what I envision during this organization, being able to empower the people. Power to the people. Power to the people. So that's what I see as the outgrowth of this organization, just being able to turn this work over in the hands of the people who are living and breathing and coalescing themselves.
Thanks.
So
we have
let me-
one more question in the chat.
go ahead.
Ali said he can't be on camera, he can't turn on his camera right now, but can you share challenges you've encountered in this work, and if you've seen different or shared hurdles dependent on the region of the US in doing this work? Is regionality a factor in there being hurdles?
Well, I tell you something. Regionally, no matter where I go, I know, and particularly in Black communities, I know I'm in a Black community. It seems to be the paradigm that we face nationally. And so in that, the challenges are all the same. The lack of resources, the lack of intentional practices that are needed to build out institutions in Black communities, because that's what it really comes down to, institutional building. And we have to build our institutions and build support. The hurdles are sometimes are insurmountable because the hurdles that BIPOC communities and BIPOC organizations go through are external, because usually we don't have the resources and we have to rely on a majority culture to provide resources. And sometimes the resources come with constraints. Yeah, they come with constraints. And so, until we able to coalesce and build out our own framework for developing resources, we're at a disadvantage. And so I'm hopeful that this organization that we now have set forth to develop will be one of those organizations that will be able to raise the awareness around the need to support BIPOC communities. I was just at the NowCap conference and I was National Association of Latino Africa, but and Bank of America made it a $25 million donation to that group to support its CDFI work. But it was still just a drop in the bucket. $25 million to go through all the communities that organization serves. It's still just a drop in the bucket. So, we have to, be adamant about advocacy. This work can't continue or can't even move without being a strong advocacy around advocating for what your needs are. And then building the right kind of partnerships. That's so important as well. I'm happy to say that when the Food Co-op Initiative approached me about this, I was happy to say yes, because I felt it was a great opportunity to share my story, but also I think it was a good opportunity to show from their perspective, their willingness to elevate our story as well. So I'm JQ and Hannah and Stuart. I really appreciate what you're doing here. Thank you. So I hope I've answered your question. I hope I answered your question. Guiding principles that guide this organization is still implementing the principles of conscious community development. And conscious community development, let me just put a definition around that. That is just being being aware of who you are and how you do what you do. So, example will be this here. If you're going to be about being about equitable or equality, then you have to understand that you have to give up something. You can't hold on to everything and say that I'm an equitable practitioner. You have to be able to give up something. Either your time, your resources, you have to be able to give up something to help the next group or next group of people to come along, and so they can move up the ladder. And it's really about reaching back and reaching up. And so our organization seeks to build economically cooperative and equitable communities through transparency, inclusiveness, and collectivism. NDCC successfully works to improve financial sustainability, encourage business ownership, and increase residential real estate ownership in Black neighborhoods. We feel as though that residential ownership is really a key to stabilizing many of our neighborhoods. Right now, we're probably a little above 40% home ownership in our communities. And we see still where we still see areas where we still need to work on financial education, financial literacy, so that we can build out more aware consumers. But also too, we have to look at business ownership in our community. The dollar turns around 8 hours in the Black community, 8 hours. And that's because that we don't have a lot of, the reason because we don't have a lot of Black businesses owning businesses in the Black community. And so we have to, encourage business ownership. And we're going to encourage business ownership because Black businesses hire Black people. It's just the way it is. And with that said, if we can encourage business ownership, increase residential ownership in Black neighborhoods, then I think that those are two things that will elevate the success that we see in terms of building economically sustainable communities. And I will say this too, that we work with and partner with other organizations. And I should have probably said this at the beginning, but we've solely focused on building out the framework for Black-led and Black governed organizations. And that doesn't mean that we don't, again, work with other folks. We do. But we know that it's important to lift up your own community. And I express that for everyone, be you white, brown, yellow, to elevate your own community. And so sometimes when you put your onus on developing Black communities, it seems to have a tainted perspective attached to it. And so, but it is what it is. Is what it is. And so, as the Bible says that, you gotta reach out and lift up the least of us. And right now, the Black community is certainly in need of a lot of lift. And we're working hard at it. And don't get me wrong, we're working hard at it because we're building out organizations to build and expand community development ecosystems that increase structural capacity and leadership in Black communities. We're working at educating our young professionals more about why they need to look at developing businesses and supporting institutions in our communities. And we're working at regenerating Black communities. So, and that's building community-based leadership. which is important. I say again that consciously we're at a low web. And so if you think of your car, and then my analogy is, you think of your car and how it runs when your pistons are worn out. It will run, but it runs slow. Your velocity is slow. But when you change the pistons, then you're able to accelerate at a much higher speed. And so I say that right now that we're, as a Black community, are operating at a low web of energy, and we have to infuse more energy into our communities. And a part of that is developing community-based leadership with a vision on how they can grow and how they can connect our communities. And of course, I talked about community-based business ownership. And so we advocate for capital investment to support Black community-based organizations and businesses, because they're all institutions that help to increase the scale of economic sustainability, which contributes directly to the revitalization in disinvested Black communities and Black neighborhoods. So yeah. So with those two things done, building out leadership and then building out ownership of property, I think that we put ourselves in a really great position to accent and achieve some of the things that we hopefully will need to be done. I'd like to just share the strategic pillars of this organization. And I mentioned conscious community development is a principle-based community development paradigm constructed between indigenous grassroots stakeholders, localized organizations, and investors with agreed understanding of how equitable property must be incorporated in an inclusionary process sustained with liberating spiritual principles and cultural identifiers. All that is saying is that we have to develop a principle-based practice and paradigm of how we do our work. And if your principle-based practice is not rooted in consciousness, then it really won't benefit those of you who you hope to benefit, but also it probably and most likely won't be a non-liberating. It'd be a non-liberating platform. It won't work toward liberating folks. And so we're about liberating our people, our communities. I love the fact that we were able to partner with other groups and share our principle-based practices and learn from others. And I think that that's really important. And so yeah, I think that's important. The other pillar is cooperatives, and we feel that collective ownership is really so vital to building racial and cultural strategies that advance economic investment in Black communities. We've seen the work of what cooperatives, in terms of potential, they have the potential to go into so many areas of productivity, of ownership, and so we're committed to building the pillars around cooperatives and guiding this work in a strategic alliance that can develop equity, ownership, and communities of color. Third pillar is strengthening community development ecosystems that promote and strengthen infrastructural capacity, organizational governance, and access to capital for Black-led community development organizations, and simultaneously build indigenous leadership within a fragile Black community development ecosystem while creating advantages for starting locally owned social enterprises, land trusts, and co-ops. And so, again, you know, we're focused on strengthening this community development ecosystem. And so let me just talk about what the community development ecosystem looks like from a Black perspective, and which may not be that different than from any organization or racially diverse organization's perspective. But we see the ecosystem serving the whole. So in home ownership, you can't have home ownership operate in a vacuum without some sense of education around financial literacy. Then you have to have resources in terms of to have access to capital to lend. Then you have to have contractors in there who actually can service those properties as they go through the fragile longevity of needing repairs. That's just the ecosystem around housing. But even though that is one ecosystem, but there's another ecosystem around small business development, where you have to have education, access to capital. And so we know that in order to have sound communities, we must have strong ecosystems that support those communities and support them in ways that help them to grow and become sustainable, create sustainable practices in terms of infrastructure capacity. So our three pillars are conscious community development, cooperatives, and strengthening community development ecosystem. And so all the events that we've done, all the ones I earlier pointed out, has really been focused on really enhancing and strengthening the ecosystem, because we think that's so important, being able to develop that ecosystem around community development. And the ecosystem around community development can take on so much. It takes on health, it takes on cultural arts, it takes on education, it takes on small business, it takes on housing. It takes on so much in terms of what you can derive out of it and what you can lead it to. Yeah. And so I do want to just say that we're, and I have not shared, but we're a small organization. I wish I could say that we were large, but we're not. We're small, and but we're small and mighty. And so we have a board of six. We have two part-time workers and a volunteer that we just recruited through the volunteer Maryland program. And so we've been able to do all this work with a limited staffing capacity. But when you are small, you learn to do so much because you have to be able to do so much, and you cross-fertilize yourself in skill sets. So yeah. So while we are small, we've been mighty in our work. And so I do want to just share with you that we always advocate and support individual that want to be a part of our organization in some way. So we do have membership levels, and we do have a good group of folks who's joined us as members, and so we're pleased to have them on board. Helps that they come in, they help us with our events, they support us financially, and so yeah, so yes. So the three categories of membership, are individual membership, new professional members, and student members. And so we've been really fortunate to have a lot of students that have come through our doors and shared in our work. And hopefully they've learned something that they can take back into their proper fields and help them to grow. And lastly, we always in the area of recruiting volunteers. And as well as you well know, doing your own work, that having members, if you're a member organization, having members is important, but then having volunteers is equally important as well, because when people are giving their time and effort to support your work, it means so much. It means so much. So yes. So that's my presentation for this evening. I'd like to take the next, I think, 18 minutes and answer any questions if I can.
We've already got one question in the chat. Let me get back up there. It's giving me trouble. Come on, let me go back up there. Ali brought forward another question. So, can you elaborate on your definition of consciousness? Class, race consciousness? Do you mean spiritual, religious consciousness? I might have missed that at the beginning. Thanks.
Okay. Well, consciousness is what it is. For us, we focus on spiritual consciousness, not racial consciousness, but spiritual consciousness. And so, with that said, we align ourselves with right thinking, right actions, and challenge ourselves. I think when you're in a conscious, and you're on a conscious space, that the most you can do for yourself is to challenge yourself each and every day to be a better person. And so that's what we try to do here at this organization. We try to challenge ourselves to be better, not accepting our faults, but correcting our faults, and then using those corrections as a pathway for higher, more spiritual growth and exploration.
I'm going to pause if anyone else wants to throw any questions in the chat or wants to unmute. Otherwise, I got one for you.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, you kind of spoke to it, but I wanted to ask more. And of course, you know where I stand on it, and you know what I do. But I think it's really interesting looking at your mission that there's been this powerful focus on cooperation as the model in these training cohorts you guys have had, in these national conferences. A lot of people ask, why cooperation? It goes too slow, it moves to, and I think it's really interesting that you guys very purposely picked to put a lot of energy into that model. Do you want to, could you just share a little more about why?
Well, I think it's first of all, it's cultural, because as Africans coming to the shores of North America, we brought a communal perspective with us. And so in a communal society, you share resources, you share food, you share. And so cooperatives was a European term that got put out there, but it's really just, it's communal living. And so I think that, as a people, that we sort of got away from that, and we got away from it in a way that focused us on individualism. And I think individualism has definitely a drawback to it, because it's focused on the I, and we focus on the we, the us. And so in building that, what better way to do it than working cooperatively and working in a communal way, where you can build community, See, and that's the thing about cooperatives, what I love about cooperatives, it builds community. And it makes you interdependent, not dependent, but interdependent on others. And so, so we do a lot of work around cooperatives. We've been, I got exposed to cooperatives early on in my career, about 20 some years ago, and working in housing cooperatives. And so I lived in a housing cooperative. And so I've got the upfront experience of participating in a cooperative and seeing how it works and how it can benefit a collective agenda around how you build out connectivity, how you can be codependent on someone else, and how you can what's the word I'm looking for? How you can be self-sustaining in all of that.
Thank you. It's a question we sometimes hear a lot, from groups, and there's frustration with the length it takes, but I think you speak to eloquently the shared resources, the cultural, but also, how are we going to build a future that's full conscious communities if we haven't learned how to share power and deal with the difficulties that there is in relearning how to share what we do?
Yeah. I think we're on a new pathway around cooperative development. I think that and I'm seeing it as I move more in and out and talk with folks. I see folks are understanding now the importance of working together, and what the benefits can be, what the benefits are.
We're definitely seeing an uptick in that. I think we're also always seeing an uptick of that in American culture when things get harder. And it's one of the things that, the iron is very hot since 2020, especially. Have you guys seen that as well? An uptick in interest since the pandemic in the cooperative model and in learning more from you guys on it?
Oh yeah. Since this pandemic, I think the pandemic, there's a blessing in everything. And you just got to look for the good in it. And there was good that came out of this whole pandemic. It really brought people together in ways unimaginable, in ways that probably would have taken much longer to germinate among people. And it's really given people a sense of ownership, a sense of oneness. And that's one of the things that I really love about cooperatives is that since once you have gone through all that you go through, and let me just say, it ain't an easy process working in a cooperative. let me just share it. It's not an easy process, but once you've gotten through the learning and the acrimonies that come with learning someone else, and you come to that point of self-discovery, oh goodness, it opens your eyes, opens your world. Yeah, it opens your eyes in your world. So
Ron.
Yes.
Yes, Eric again.
Yeah.
And of course, I noticed that you're kind of taking that approach similar to, I guess, what my co-op is taking, right? As far as expanding the definition of a Black cooperative business community, where you're including non-cooperative businesses in your area of Baltimore. And that would make sense because we do have to kind of customize our models to our local needs. And of course, and I know you've been in some of these spaces. I came to your conference back in April.
Yes.
And of course, and then I saw you at the Up and Coming conference in was in May. And of course, and I was looking to see you. I was in Florida at a credit union conference, at the African American Credit Union Coalition conference. in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I'll say, well, I guess you missed this one. So maybe that it'll be in Atlanta next year. So perhaps you can catch that one. So just share, if you will. I know you don't want to kind of give away your trade secrets, but without you've already mentioned FCI. Any other valuable macro level organizational connections you think, that strategic connections that you think that you made that will help you toward the mission that you're headed toward? Any other valuable big name partners or kind of big capacity deliverers?
Ooh. Well, I don't know if I've connected anyone of that sort yet. I'm a grassroots kind of guy. I keep my relationship very close and very personal. And I think that over the years I focus on the everyday person, the everyday needs of what a person needs. And I think if we can use this model in any way, it would be to serve the needs of the least of us, the least fortunate. And I think if we can do that and do it well, I think that we'll be able to achieve a lot of the outcomes that we so envision. But it's going to take a lot of work, because consciousness. I want to ask about consciousness, because we're at a low web of consciousness right now in this in particularly in the Black community. We're at a low web where you ask someone, where you live at? Oh, well, I live in so. That when I ask someone that question, they give me that kind of energy, it tells me that that's how they perceive in their community. It says to me that's how they perceive themselves. So we got to elevate the consciousness and the precept about how you view yourself in light of what your circumstances are. How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? And if you see yourself as much larger than your circumstances, then you're on the right path. You're on the right path. If you can see yourself larger than your circumstances. And so, yeah. So I to answer your question, I don't know if I have any big supporters, because unfortunately, those with, we're seeing some shifts around those with money, and they're shifting their resources, but it's a slow process. It's a slow process. I mean, it was just last week. Was it last week where someone, Paradigm or Paradona or whatever it was, he just gave his fortune away? Yeah, was it Paradona?
Patagonia.
Yeah, yeah, just gave his fortune away. To and hopefully it will enhance and be used to enhance the livability of people. But yeah.
Thanks.
Well, JQ, you said your evening crowd was a quiet crowd, and
I told you the evening crowd, the daytime crowd is talking as all get out. The evening crowd is always real quiet. They're all eating their dinner and taking care of their kids while listening. But we're really grateful you came out and talked with us, because we had a lot of questions about what you're doing, and we wanted to be able to have this video and share out what's going on to all of the startup food co-ops. There are so many existing and emerging Black-led food co-ops right now. And so I wanted to make sure that we have this video so we could connect folks to what you're doing, the powerful work you're doing. What's next? You did say that you got, Ali, Ali's got his hands up, so I'm going to shut up for a minute and let him talk. What do you got, Ali?
Hi, this is Ali. As I mentioned, my video is not working at the moment, but I did want to ask a question about your last comment about the energy, or I think you mentioned something about that, like how you approach the community, and if you speak to someone, or you said the web of energy, something within the Black community that you noticed. If you said something like that, um, if not the space right now, the further talk, but just I think I see a parallel where, you know, I saw you studied sociology, I studied anthropology, we're that social science realm of how do you engage with community, like this intangible thing of energy, feeling, thought. How do you put that into practical application with which I believe your work is doing? I think what I just wanted to share, question, comment was, yeah, like I could see that of like how to approach community, recognizing its history, its culture, approach, but I guess each person has to have a specific skill set to approach that, and I'm not sure that's an area that I'm trying to communicate with other work in other co-ops too. Of yeah, I'm not sure if that fully made full sense, but I just wanted to say that I relate a lot to what you're saying about how do you approach community with a specific historical, social conditions, violence, history, is what I was saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Ali. It's all about love. I mean, just it's all about love. And and if we can just continue to be loving and caring, I think that we'll get there. And what I see is that, and I talk about energy, is that we're at a low web of energy, and we have to heighten the energy. We have to heighten the awareness and around self and community. See, that's where we make the connection around self and community. And so it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. You and I and all of us, we all products of how we've been taught, how we've lived our lives. And so it's a process. And so if you can start small and work on the tangible things, I think that you'll see yourself achieving a lot of what you set out to do. So I'm quite sure that in this sense of, in your sense of awareness, that you are aware and you live the example. That's where I think that that what I share with folks is just be the example. Be the example. Be the example of who you choose to be, and be your best example of that person. And believe me, someone is watching you. Someone is always watching you. They're always watching you. And they're watching you for a reason. They're watching you to mirror what you're doing. So in your conscious space, just know that people are always watching, and that I'm always going to do my best. And even though it may fall short, I've done my best.
Well, I think that's a lovely place for us to wrap up. I want to thank again Ron for being here tonight, for sharing his time and his wisdom with all of us. And if you didn't know, he'll be back next Thursday night. He's got a fabulous panel lined up talking about the future of Black cooperation. Did you want to share any thoughts on that, Ron, before we go?
Oh yeah, I'm bringing some of my colleagues that were working with me, some who I've just gotten to know. And so we're going to share with the audience the work that we've been doing, the vision work that we've been doing around developing this ecosystem around Black-led, Black-governed cooperatives. I'm excited about it. They're excited about it. And so yeah, we're looking forward to to the presentation next week.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to Ron. Thank you guys for sharing your time with us. There's a whole nother week of these sessions, including Ron's panel. And if you were here today, you'll get an email tomorrow morning telling you the lineup for next week, and we hope you'll join us for some of that. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, JQ.
You're welcome. We're so glad you were here.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. Have a lovely evening.